I'm blue, blah da dee da da. That's sorry. I've taken a Lemsip and it's slightly gone to my head. Right, where are we? Well, it's the moment many Formula One fans have apparently been waiting for, and I refer not to the long-awaited return of Lance Stroll to the Aston Martin cockpit, but to a little bit of blue-on-blue action between the two McLaren drivers. Lando Norris finally striking Oscar Piastri in a tussle for the top of the Formula One World Championship. And it all went down in Canada, as it did between Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton many years ago. But before we get into that, I'm going to say hello to my guests joining me today from around the world because they want to be protected from the ghastly cold I've picked up. Joining us from Barcelona, it's Phil Clereen. How are you, Phil?
Very good, Codis, and healthy as well. So thanks for keeping your germs where they are.
Yeah, exactly. Despite that recent trip to your place from the gas man, I hope there's no carbon monoxide filtering in. He's done his job okay. And joining us from the Netherlands, like musical youth, we're passing the Dutchie today. It's Ronald Vording.
Goedemorgen. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, all good. So also, I guess I've got a safe distance from you this time, so yeah, we're good to go.
Yeah, we're not going to have to share a car or anything till Belgium, I think, so hopefully it'll be gone by then. Now, before we proceed to digest the Canadian Grand Prix, we've picked up a signal that's been bouncing around the earth for a day or so. Let us, in the words of Kylie Minogue, step back in time to Sunday night, and we're going to hear from for not just a man with a large rack, I'm told, but Ben Hunt and Mark Mann-Bryans.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Paddock here in Montreal at the Canadian Grand Prix. Everyone around us is packing up to go home. That includes all of the people in the FIA motorhome behind us. That is because we are now well over almost 6 hours after the checkered flag here in Canada, where George Russell crossed the finish line in first place. We've only just found out, Ben, that he's going to hold on to the trophy he picked up.
Yeah, it's 9:30 here local time, so yeah, over 5.5 hours after the race had finished, we finally got confirmation that George Russell wins the Canadian Grand Prix. A pretty good result for George, you'd say. Started on pole, converted, didn't put a foot wrong, under a little bit of pressure at times, but great result for him. It's just a bit disappointing to be so late in the day to be celebrating it. But very interesting. Great result for George. Just what he needed, I think, after a difficult couple of races. He's been there and thereabouts, hasn't he? I think he said in the press conference afterwards, he's surprised that he's in this championship fight still, given the pace of the McLarens, which I'm sure we will come on to shortly. Good result.
And obviously he sat there talking to the media, doing all of his media duties. You spoke to Wolf as well. He did all of his media duties before there was even any suggestion that he might lose this race win. It was only a Red Bull appeal went in, saying that two parts to the appeal, but when Russell was behind the safety car, claiming he'd been driving erratically, braking heavily, and then not keeping the 10 car lengths behind the safety car at certain times.
So there's a certain amount of time that a team has to wait before they can submit an appeal to challenge the final result, and that's where the stewards then call the drivers who are involved. They listen to their side, then they deliberate and look at all the data, everything they have available, which is using the room that they've got, the VAR room, if you like, go through all the data and then make a decision on whether Red Bull had grounds that there was a new investigation required, which could, of course, mean the result had changed. But in this instance, it didn't happen.
No, I think the frustrating thing is that this does come out.
Thank you, darling.
No worries.
There wasn't a bin, but it was a man with a big rack.
I think it's worth noting as well, they go through everything in order in terms of the stewards after the race, and there were so many other things in there. There were drivers driving erratically behind the safety car, there were punishments for Ocon and Behrman to be looked at.
That's the frustrating thing. They do it in order, don't they? Yeah. So it's the order in which the offence happens and is submitted. So while we're sitting here waiting for the result to be confirmed, they're going through all the offences first. So sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, it's chronological rather than almost impactful, if you like, of what the impact it might have on the race. I think the frustrating thing is the media room is empty as well. There's only maybe a handful of us left in there, and then the decision drops at 9:05 local time, and it's the Red Bull appeal has been dismissed, been rejected because it's not founded. Now, how it takes so long to get to that is frustrating. We know that Verstappen and Russell, as well as representatives from both teams, both Mercedes and Red Bull. They were in there for almost 45 minutes, talking to the stewards, fighting their cause, and in the end, it's all done and dusted.
Yeah.
Look, Russell gets the win. Verstappen, maybe it was worth an appeal. You know, Red Bull didn't. Christian Horner insisted Max didn't even know that they were going to appeal. It wasn't him pushing for that. So that's all done and dusted. Thankfully, we sorted with that. But there was another big issue today, and also one that if it hadn't happened, we would never have had this safety car incident in the first place. And that was after quite a steady and slow Grand Prix in terms of action.
Yeah.
End of lap 66, Lando Norris makes a move on his teammate Oscar Piastri, gets it all wrong, crashes out, puts it in the wall. First of all, Ben, let's talk about the actual incident. Was it born out of maybe a bit of frustration?
I think so. He knows that he needs to start making up ground, doesn't he, on Piastri. It's got a 10-point advantage going into the race. And he had seen a few moments in the laps before that maybe he was the quicker car. There was a few marginal errors that Piastri was making. And I guess Norris decided to take his opportunity, but we quickly saw that wasn't there. He was closed, the door was closed, he ends up in the wall, and obviously we go from there.
Yeah, I thought it was really telling that he offered that apology instantly. You hear him on the radio, puts it in the wall. It's all my fault, hands up. Is that refreshing to see, or do you want to see a bit more of a bite from Lando there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I want to see some more bite. I think that, you know, I applaud the fact that he admitted that he was wrong in this particular incident, and I think that it's very clear that it was wrong. And ultimately he came off the worst, ended his race, didn't finish, but still got a 5-second penalty for an offence. So
another steward's room
pointless, you could argue, given he didn't finish. But yeah, no, I think it was good that he admitted that he was wrong. The only difficulty is that, of course, you know, I'd like to see some of that more tenacity from Norris. I think that in the race before in Barcelona, we saw Max Verstappen banging wheels with George Russell, and in the aftermath of all that, there was a situation where Verstappen didn't apologise.
Yep.
You know, he said that shouldn't have happened, but he stopped short of offering an apology to his a rival in Russell. And I looked at that and the mentality around that, and it is that winning mentality of refusing to give an inch, and also appearing to be the stronger individual in this instance. Whereas Norris, by apologising, I know it's slightly different in the sense that they're teammates, but it also does give the impression that he's the weaker person in this, should they be going head to head. And I think that his rivals will feed off that, and that obviously builds into a wider a personality, you know, of Lando Norris, the fact that he's willing to admit, oh yeah, I got stuff wrong. And as I say, the rivals will be looking to seize on that, on any opportunity.
Excuse him. We spoke to Lando in the paddock. Actually, I asked him a couple of questions. He was, again, really open. He said, look, I've made a bit of a fool of myself. I'm not proud of what I've done. Really strong. Like, he really is owning that. I think maybe that's a good thing. But like you say, sometimes, you know, have that streak in you, that winner's mentality streak.
He could have done that privately. That's the thing.
Course, yeah.
So he could have said to Oscar and the team, I'm sorry, I mucked up. He didn't need to do it on the radio straight away, and then to double down on it in the pen when we talked to him and saying, I'm an idiot, I'm a fool, every time I try something like this, it always backfires. And, you know, as I say, on one hand, I'm like, I appreciate the honesty, but the other side, I want to see that ruthlessness come through.
It's always a question to ask about Lando at the minute. Is he too honest? Is he too hard on himself? But I don't know. It was very similar as well to that Jenson Button, Lewis Hamilton in 2011 when they were McLaren teammates. Same bit of the track, same start finish straight. Weather was a bit different, obviously. Where do McLaren go from here? Is it a big issue? Do they just say, you know, sometimes you win some and lose some?
Yeah, I think they need to just sort of draw a line under this, but be mindful of it. We were speaking a lot last year about the learning processes and how you deal with two drivers competing for wins, but we're in a scenario now where we have two drivers that are competing for a world championship. That's a totally, entirely different prospect, and I spoke to Toto Wolff about that, and he said the situation admittedly was different with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg when they clashed in Barcelona in 2016. But it is something that McLaren need to be mindful of, and probably need to revise the papaya rules or rules of engagement just to reinforce that message that they need to bring both cars home for the benefit of the championship. I know they're leading the way at the moment, but you know, they lost valuable points today from Lando crashing out.
Right, thank you, Ben, for joining us. Sorry it's so late, everyone. We are now going to try and get maybe the last poutine of our trip.
Well, guys, you've got to salute their indefatigability, don't you? We've all been there doing those paddock videos, random people wandering past with bins, Alex Kalinauckas and I obviously having Alpine team members practically streaking through our frame in Mexico City last year. But the bland played on, as the people in the comments would say. Fascinating, isn't it? Shall we pick up on, McLaren's blue on blue thing there? Lando Norris hit the back of Oscar Piastri. He saw a gap. Ronald, did you see a gap?
No, and I think not many people did. I saw some accurate comments saying that the gap was so small, not even a MotoGP bike would have gone for it. So that's probably accurate. No, it was more what Lando said himself, that he thought Oscar Piastri would move over to the right, and that could open up a gap on the inside. Obviously, never quite happened. So it was a misjudgment, a painful one for himself above all, because if it will be the two McLaren drivers going head to head for the championship, then these are really costly days for the title fight. But even more, I would like to go back to Saturday, because for me, maybe that was even more telling. Because if you go back to Saturday, FP3. Oscar Piastri, he hit the wall of champions. And after that, he lacked a little bit of confidence for the remaining laps of FP3, which is, of course, fully normal. And Lando had like the upper hand for the whole weekend until Q3, until the first run of Q3. And exactly then, he made the mistake, and Oscar Piastri did like maximum damage limitation and got a third on the grid. So I think, for me, that's maybe even more telling, because if you really want to take the fight to Piastri, if you want to win your first world championship, then those are the days to capitalize on. When Oscar is on the back foot, opportunities basically arise, and he didn't quite take them. And then the one on Sunday, it's just a poor misjudgment. I don't think it's quite at the level of Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, fighting for a race win and driving into each other. This was just one driver making a stupid mistake. He raised his hand immediately, also in the pen, said, I made a fool of myself, I let the team down, which of course was the right thing to do, to immediately take responsibility. So I think, for me, two moments were telling. The one on Sunday, obviously, but maybe even more the one on Saturday, where he had an opportunity and didn't quite take it. So these moments could be painful for Lando.
Yeah, it was sort of like Schrodinger's gap, wasn't it? And Piastri didn't open the biscuit tin, so we didn't see what was inside. Apart from some shreds of carbon fibre. Dreadfully Alan Partridge-esque set of mixed metaphors. Phil, what do you make of Norris's mindset now? A lot of people saying, well, he's blown it. Is this a crack, or is it sort of widening into a fissure?
We don't know exactly what's going on inside his head. It's easy to say, oh, he's bottling it under the pressure, or he can't handle Piastri, or this or that. We don't know. At the end of the day, he seems to be in a better place with the car, which is why it's double annoying, as Ronald said, that he didn't capitalize on that on Saturday. But he's just making too many mistakes, regardless of why he's doing it. He's making way too many. Piastri hasn't been completely faultless. He's had a few qualifying laps that didn't go his way, like Miami, for example. But Lando's just making more mistakes. And at the moment, I think he was the quickest driver in the race as well. So that's the only difference, because pace-wise, they are neck and neck. So what is going to decide the championship is consistency, and that's going Piastri's way at the moment.
What do you make of the penalty situation? There's some talk that even though Lando didn't finish, that there should have been some sort of penalty. Some people going as far as saying points on the license, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the penalty as it's given now is completely useless, of course, the 5 seconds. But that's just related to the rule book, because officially Lando Norris is still classified as 18th, and officially it's not a DNF. That's because he covered more than 90% of the race distance. And that's why the stewards simply added 5 seconds to his racing time. So on paper, he basically crashed 5 seconds later than what he did in real life. But that's, of course, not going to change anything. So it's a completely, stupid penalty. But there are two things, if you look at the FIA documents, and one is indeed the penalty points. There are two things that I find interesting. The first one is that it's mentioned in the documents that, okay, usually we should give him 10 seconds. Of course, wouldn't change anything, but okay, we should have given him 10. But we went for 5 because there were no immediate and sporting consequences. That means Oscar Piastri had no damage and he could continue. But I was really surprised to see that in the official FIA document, because usually they tell us, no, stewards always look purely at the incident and not at the consequences. Of course, we all know that's not true. They always take consequences into account. But here it was even mentioned explicitly in the document that they go for 5 seconds because there were no consequences. So that for me was quite strange in a way. And then the second element is about the penalty points indeed. If you go back to all the causing a collision incidents in the past, and that's not just Max, but if you look back a couple of months, it's also Stroll, Lawson, and many others. Basically, all of them got penalty points on their license. 2, 3, of course, with Max was outrageous in case that, you know, it was not a racing incident, but it was just him driving into someone. So that made sense to give 3 for that. But for just a normal racing incident, it's usually 1 or 2. But here there was not a single word, no explanation at all why there were no penalty points. And that was quite surprising in a way. To me, this is the better approach, because I'm all in favor of not giving penalty points so easily. I feel that usually, and I'm not talking about the incident with Max because he deserved them, but with some others, just like racing incidents, also some of them with Max in the past, I felt that penalty points were given too easily. So I'm all in favor of giving them not so easily. But then again, you get the issue that there's no consistency. And I feel that's a major problem. And that's why I would have loved to read in the FIA document why they decided not to give any penalty points. Don't get me wrong, I fully agree by not giving them, but I would have liked to read why. And yeah, those 2 elements in the FIA document I found interesting, but also a bit weird.
Yeah, it probably comes down again to Lando punishing himself and Oscar getting away without any damage. So
yeah,
they felt like he's punished himself enough, I guess. But I agree with you, Ronald. It's not entirely clear. You could just add it in a document. Why? And then we all know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll circle back to the issue of stewarding in a little while, because there's a bit to unpack from that as well. But obviously, there were quite a few other drivers in that race, and a different winner for this season. I believe it was Rudyard Kipling who said something along the lines of, if you can keep your head while all around are losing theirs, you're probably driving a Mercedes on the one weekend a year when it's actually got a race-winning turn of speed. And, well, George Russell did keep a very clear hit when he had Max Verstappen right up his backside for the beginning of the race, and Max was clearly looking to put him under pressure and try and force some sort of error out of him. And I don't know about you guys, but I looked at the weather on the day, thought it's a Mercedes, doesn't do well in warm conditions. George is going to fall off faster than John Lithgow at the end of Cliffhanger. Ronald, what did you make of that?
Yeah, it was surprising in a way. I have to say, before the Montreal weekend, we all expected them to be really, really quick. And that's not just the weather, but also the layout. I feel this layout suits Mercedes quite well. But of course, the weather played a big role on their really good long runs on Friday, on their really good Saturday performance. But then, as you said, on Sunday, the sun came out, temperatures went up, and we all expected them to suffer more with tire wear, and didn't happen. So that's also the element that Toto Wolff himself was most surprised with, listening to his post-race media debrief. But I'm still not fully convinced how it will translate to all the other races, as Toto himself was not fully convinced. He was like, yeah, I've seen this movie before. I don't know, we think we are great, and then we come to the next race and we're like P5, P6 again. So we have to remain a little bit cautious. Still, there's a little element for optimism, which is maybe the new rear suspension. Mercedes feels that it's working quite well. It's basically doing everything they hoped for. It's doing everything they saw in the simulator. So in terms of correlation, and yeah, that's a positive. So yes, positive surprise, but still a bit cautious for what's to come, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. You always have to be careful trying to find one single reason why something has happened. It's very, it's very tempting to find the easy solution and the easy answer, but I think it's a combination of stuff. Yes, the race was a bit hotter, the track temperatures were quite high, But it's also Montreal. There's no fast corners. It's a very smooth tarmac and not very abrasive. So those are also elements why Mercedes wasn't punished for its sort of rear tire degradation issues that I think are still there. If we go to your Hungaries and Silverstones, I think they might still be there. It's just that on Montreal they weren't punished, and they do have a good car when that is not a limiting factor.
What did we make of Kimi Antonelli's third place? He looked pretty assured from where I was sitting.
Yeah, really good performance. And it kind of made me think back to Oscar Piastri when he got into F1. Of course, he didn't quite have the car back then, but with a really, really big talent. You see glimpses of their potential already in the first year, and that's what we had with Oscar Piastri. We had the same with Max Verstappen when he came in, with Charles Leclerc when he came in, and now exactly the same is happening with Kimi Antonelli. And one of those glimpses we, of course, could witness in Miami, where he took the sprint pole, which was incredibly impressive. And again, this weekend, going into the weekend, he said, yeah, the triple header hasn't been great for me. I was struggling a bit with the softer Pirelli compound, especially with the C6. And then he bounced back perfectly fine in Montreal already with the whole weekend, the progress he made. Because on Friday, struggling a little bit, then found his feet basically towards the end of FP3, got up there in qualifying when he had to. And really important because it's an element he struggled a little bit with in Formula 2. This time he kept the tires alive beautifully, and even better than the Red Bull, we have to say, in the first two stints, because Max was pushing, I feel, quite hard in stint 1 and also beginning of stint 2. But then Antonelli had more of his tires left towards the end and catched him quickly and even almost made the overcut work. So that was impressive. He admitted that in stint 3, he basically did what Max did in the previous stint. He said, yeah, I was a bit too greedy. I pushed a bit too hard in the first couple of laps, and that made him look his mirrors a bit more towards the end. Thankfully, the McLaren cars for him came together. But all in all, really, really impressive. And those glimpses of pure class that show that he's a great one for the future.
Speaking of class, in second place, Max Verstappen, he said that was about the maximum he could achieve. And certainly when he disappeared into the pits early, I kind of thought, well, that's it then. He's sort of played all his cards. I was pretty surprised to see him, despite the fact that he's a multiple world champion, actually get that car into second place, because he did look under threat. And obviously, Ronald being Dutch, you have to recuse yourself from answering this. So I'm going to bounce it to Phil. What did you make of Verstappen's drive?
Phil, who is Belgian, just like Max.
Now it's getting dangerous.
No, it was a good drive, but no surprises there, right? Obviously, he had the same time as Russell last year as they fought for pole, so it's not like they were always going to be struggling in Canada necessarily. But it's still not their favorite hunting ground. It was just a good drive, and I think he had the maximum. Mercedes Clereen had the quickest car. McLaren struggled, which was probably the biggest surprise, and the Mercedes being quick or Verstappen being in the mix. So it just shows that you can never rule them out. It just didn't have enough left on the tires. They still degrade their tires a bit too quickly to really have a go at Russell.
Yeah, I would like to, if I'm allowed to, as a Dutch guy, I would like to add at least
it's just going to blow the minds of the people who always say that Autosport's full of biased British journalism. So
yeah,
speak on.
Okay, so then let me have a go at it. The first one is related to tire deck, because if we look at Friday's long runs, actually they were quite accurate this time, because they showed that the top teams, or at least 3 of them, so McLaren, Mercedes, and I was about to say Red Bull, but maybe I should say only Verstappen. But those 3 were quite close already in the long runs, much closer than we've seen before in 2025. And that perfectly translated into the race, because the final stint, it was really close, and the McLaren drivers were slightly quicker on Friday and also slightly quicker towards the end of the race, but just not enough to challenge for the win. But one thing that didn't really translate was that on Friday, Red Bull was actually a little bit better on tires than all the others, if you look at how much they lost per lap. And that's one element that didn't show on Sunday, because Max, as Phil rightly pointed out, went through his tires quite quickly. I still feel that maybe he pushed a little bit too hard at the beginning of stint 1, which is normal, because of course you're trying to win the race. and again in stint 2, and then he learned from it, as Helmut Marko also admitted. In stint 3, took it easier, and I think that's why he could do the 32 or 33 laps on those hard tires at the end. The second thing on the strategy is that Max himself, after the race, explained we both, like as Red Bull, we drove both an offensive and defensive race, which was defensive on track, looking at his mirrors more, and offensive with the strategy. But I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, because of course, going for the undercut twice, you can call it offensive. But basically, they use the undercut to defend. And yeah, it's a piece I'm working on at the moment as well. So I listen to all the onboards again and all the radio messages. And then you can clearly hear that they react to Antonelli, especially the second pit stop. Once Antonelli gets within his DRS, the call to come in is a late one. So they say box, box. And Max said, oh, I made it, just to make clear that, that he's in the pit, but it was quite a late call. So that was all, yes, it was an undercut, but it was all about defending. So to answer the first question, yes, I definitely feel that this was the maximum. And that's also why after the race, Max said, I don't really think about the championship yet. Of course, I know he says it every weekend, but he said we still lack pure speed, basically. Pure speed and tire management. And yes, McLaren was vulnerable this weekend, maybe for the first time in 2025. But still, if Red Bull really wants to challenge them over the whole year, they still need more performance.
In a championship fight like this, when McLaren have a disaster, that's going to have an important outlook for the championship. Someone else obviously thinking about the championship outcome was Red Bull team principal Christian Horner, because there was a bit of a merry dance after the race. Ben and MMB alluded to it earlier on, slightly frustrated at having to wait until the Grand Prix chattels were being packed up around them while they shot their video there in the Montreal paddock. Smallest violin in the world, decisions take as long as they take. But yeah, 5.5 hours while the stewards deliberated over various things before they got to the protest against the winning Mercedes. Phil, what do you make of that? Do you think that maybe Zak Brown had it right a few months ago when he said that there should be a charge to lodge a fatuous-looking penalty so that teams don't just waste everybody's time?
Yeah, I think it's €2,000 now, is it? I mean, I'm not sure that's a deterrent to a Formula One team. It certainly would be a deterrent to me. But yeah, it does sort of invite spurious investigations and protests. It is, I suppose, in their right to do so, but that was never really going to work, because it was pretty clear that, yes, you can brake behind the safety car. I think Russell was looking in his mirror to make sure that Max wasn't about to drive into the back of him. So, and then the 10 car lengths rule. Yes, you need to keep within 10 car lengths of the safety car, but you also need to stick to your delta time in your dashboard, and that's what Russell was doing. And then safety car was driving faster, so he was just trying to follow the rules, I think. So yeah, I think Ronald could probably tell you more about the process itself, but I guess the frustrating part is that it first of all took a long time for Red Bull to decide to protest, and then they had to go through the FIA, then they had to get the stewards involved after that. So by the time they finally got around to issuing a verdict, it was 5 hours plus after the race. We heard from Toto Wolff at the F1 movie premiere last night, and he called it petty and embarrassing, because he felt it was a complete waste of time. It was never going to work, and it was just a fair and square victory.
Bryce Davis would say, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? And Ronald, I suppose the point we really have to emphasise is that the situation on track was a lot more complicated than it looked. If you just look at the onboards, and you would think that Russell was quite a distance from the safety car.
Yeah, and it made me think back to Miami a little bit, because exactly the same thing happened. Basically, their Red Bull delayed their post-race media session with Christian Horner multiple times. And then when the session did happen, it was just after the FIA summons document came out. I had to laugh a bit in Miami, because we were sitting there, and then the Red Bull PR people were asking, so what's the news? And then exactly that moment, the FIA document dropped. But of course, that was all planned because then Horner could clarify some things. And that was interesting to touch upon what Phil mentioned, that Horner said, no, we lodged 2 protests. And the one was indeed the braking maneuver, the second one, the 10 car lengths. But in the FIA document, it was only about the first one. So we were wondering, okay, what happened to the second one? But what happened is that Red Bull withdrew the second protest once it became clear that it basically didn't make a lot of sense because of the delta time and because of the safety car slowing down. I think that was on purpose, maybe to get at least one racing lap in. And then it accelerated again, so then you drop too far back. And to be fair, Max himself complained about it as well. He said like the safety car was driving too slow. That's why George was using some hand gestures to make clear that he had to speed up. So this was also something fully decided by Red Bull and something definitely not initiated by Max Verstappen. I think that's important to mention. But then they were in the steward's room. And of course it takes time because the meeting itself already took 45 minutes. Red Bull basically said, yeah, the braking maneuver was erratic, and also he went on the radio straight away, and that's unsportsmanlike behavior. Then of course Mercedes could reply, and they were really well prepared because they had also telemetry data, but then from Max's car, not only from that lap but also from some other laps behind the safety car, to show that at a couple of times he braked with exactly the same force as George Russell. And then George explained like, yeah, basically I was forced to do this by the safety car, and also the car behind me has to be prepared to do it. Then an FIA official spoke, and he basically paved the way for the stewards already because he fully went with George's narrative, and then the stewards did the same. The only thing I fully agree with Ben and MMB is one of the issues is that, they will take all the summons and then release all the documents in order. So that's why first they did all the safety car infringement and then the McLaren one. And then this was the very last one. And of course, it was the most important one, the one that everyone was waiting for. So I do agree that maybe it's not a great look for Formula One, especially not for new fans coming in, that, you have to wait for 5.5 hours to get the final race classification. But I think it's not only on the FIA, it's a bit of responsibility of the teams as well. And in this case, I agree that from the beginning, we kind of felt it was not going to work for Red Bull. And then, yeah, maybe it's just 5.5 hours wasted for everyone. But yeah, it is what it is.
But I guess at the end of the day, this also goes back to the penalty point situation, doesn't it? Because there's some paranoia maybe from Red Bull that people were going to try and rile Max up and goad him into a penalty point. Obviously, George Russell sort of playfully alluded to it in the post-qualifying press conference, saying he's got a few more penalty points to play with Max didn't particularly enjoy, I think. But it was part of that, right? Christian Horner sent Red Bull, alerted the FIA beforehand, like, pay attention, people might try stuff.
That sounded like it came from deep within the rabbit hole to me.
Yeah. So that was sort of their mindset. So when Russell did brake the way he did and then called Max out on a safety car, I think that was probably playing on their minds more than anything else.
Yeah, but to be honest, I can understand that mindset because, the upcoming race is, of course, Red Bull's home race on the Red Bull Ring. And also commercially, it's extremely important with all the tens of thousands of Dutch fans going there. So if he would miss that one, it would be a disaster, not just from a sporting point of view, but also commercially. So I think if you keep that in the back of your mind, then it does make sense for Red Bull to go to the race director before the race and at least to do everything within their power to alert them that, hey, something might happen. So I think if you purely look from Red Bull's perspective, all of it makes sense to some extent. If you purely look from Mercedes' perspective, it also makes sense for Toto to say it's embarrassing because he feels it's just a waste of time. And that's probably also what people back home think. So I think, I know it's an incredibly boring answer, but I think all of them had the right to do what they did. It just led to a 5.5 hours delay that no one enjoyed. But if you put yourself in Christian Horner's position, it probably made sense. So yeah, in the end of the day, it was not ideal, but I think we should, just accept it and move on.
At the end of the day, Mercedes just wanted to go home like everybody else.
Probably, yeah.
Nobody wants to stay there longer than you need to on packing up. Like,
Except me, probably, in the paddock, but yeah.
Well, the buses do wait until they're full, so there'd have been a lot of people sitting waiting for the last couple of seats to be filled while Ben and MMB were doing their video.
Last year, by the way, in Montreal, I was staying there so long that the people in the media center felt sorry for me and they gave me free beer. So if you stay long enough, there might be some benefits to it.
We know you sleep under your desk, Ronald.
Yeah, I do.
Another thing with the stewarding this weekend, we did say we'd circle back to that. Derek Warwick dropped from the stewarding panel for making comments, giving an interview. A lot of that is basically committing the same error as Johnny Herbert, wasn't it? Commenting on stewarding decisions, and also a lot of it, some people are a bit uncomfortable with it being done as PR for gambling websites. Certainly, I am the child of Methodist parents, so I can understand a little bit of discomfort about that. Phil, what did you make of plucky Derek Warwick making possibly his biggest mistake since he stuck that Lotus on its roll hoop at the beginning of the 1990 Italian Grand Prix?
Yeah, I do. There is an issue with that. I mean, should a referee of a sport, doesn't matter which sport it is, should they give their own personal commentary for money on a gambling website? That doesn't sit well with me either. But at the same time, stewards aren't being paid. They're volunteers. So that is probably the bigger issue to address. If you have qualified professional stewards and officials, which the FIA wants to get to in the end, that's what they're working on, then probably you won't be tempted to go to a betting website for a little payday. So it's a complex issue, but yeah, I think it's probably fair to ground him for one race, but not to get rid of him completely, because by all accounts, he's a very respected steward. So, Ronald,
I know certainly there was a big needle between Red Bull and Johnny Herbert. Certainly, Jos Verstappen and Johnny Herbert. Do you think we'll be seeing the same sort of thing with stewards to come if they start sounding off? Other people's decisions.
Yeah, there was still a slight difference because what Herbert was really personal in his comments, and that's what Phil said. If you go back to like a referee in football, if he would say something about one player a day before he's the referee of the World Cup final, let's say, of course that's never going to work. So I think what Johnny Herbert did was much, much, much worse. Having said that, this was also a bit stupid with the Herbert example in the back of your head, because you know the guidelines, you know that you're not allowed to do it. So it was a bit silly. But yeah, I fully agree with Phil that the bigger issue is they should be paid, and that probably takes away the temptation to go to betting websites, which of course it's something as a steward you should never do. So it's still a mistake. I think it's still fair to get him Canadian Grand Prix. I think it was still a wise decision. But I think the FIA really need to have a look at it and just pay them decently, and then we can get rid of all these discussions.
In the recent Six Nations Rugby Championship, the British broadcaster got in former referee Nigel Owens, one of the most respected referees in the business when he was on the whistle, to sort of act as a sort of an expert co-commentator or someone they would throw to explain referees' decisions and that sort of thing. And dear Lord, you've never seen an individual sit so firmly on the fence when discussing another referee's decisions. And maybe that's what the policy they should stick to. Anyway, before we go, we need to talk about Ferrari, because it was another dreadful weekend for them, really, wasn't it, by their standards? A circuit where they kind of had expected to do better. In his post-race briefing, Fred Vasseur said that if you unpick it, you look at Charles Pace, he could have been quicker. They might not have been on for pole, but they should have been closer in the race. Lots of faults of execution, ridiculous pit stop timing for Lewis Hamilton, putting him into traffic, ridiculous pit strategy for Charles Leclerc, having him on one set of tyres for pretty much the entire race. It was kind of ridiculous, wasn't it, Phil?
Yeah, it's just the bigger issue there is the race execution, the weekend execution. Obviously, Leclerc misses pretty much all of Friday with his crash, and then that requires a chassis change. His qualifying, as a result, wasn't as good as it should have been. He looked very quick, actually, He could have been on the front two rows easily. So, and then Lewis hits a poor old groundhog, which obviously is distressing. It just kind of all went wrong as it was. I do agree with the strategy on Leclerc's side. Like, look, they were going to finish sixth. If you just follow everybody else's strategy, he's going to finish a distant sixth, as it turned out to be. Okay, he moved up to fifth because of Norris, but they were going nowhere. So why not listen to your driver and try and make a one-stop work? He said the tires are still good. We're only halfway. The hearts keep going. Yes, they are missing knowledge from not having done race runs on Leclerc's car because of what happened on Friday, but just roll the dice. Why not? And I know it's Ferrari. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If Leclerc had attempted the one-stop and it would have been a failure, they would have been slaughtered in Italian media. No, they haven't done it. They've played safe. And guess what? They're being slaughtered in Italian media. So they can't win. And I do empathize with that. But if you have got nothing to gain and you're going to finish a distant sixth, why not try something?
Yeah, Ronald, there's a bit of a slaughterhouse going on in the Italian media at the moment, isn't there? Fred Vasseur and Loic Serra is another of the team members who's having fingers angrily jabbed at them from the Italian media, who seem to be extremely well briefed from someone further north of Fred Vasseur in the food chain. So what do we make of that? Who's getting angry further north from Fred Vasseur? And some of the commentary seemed to be very specific about Vasseur's management style, and I wrote a piece for Autosport yesterday, went up behind the paywall, so perhaps not everyone's seen it, but for me, one of the intriguing things was Fred Vasseur's style is obviously to act as a firewall for his staff to kind of protect them from some of the pressure from above. And if you look back at what Jean Todt did when he was team principal, he did the same thing, and that worked very effectively for Ferrari, rather than letting all the pressure rain down on everyone from above and let a culture of backbiting and blame shifting start. And it seems to me that Ferrari, the Italian media, want them to go back to the bad old days.
Yeah, but to be honest, I don't think it will solve much. And to pick up on what Phil said, I think it's even part of the problem, because the same happened with the strategy. I talked to some people within the paddock, and they told me the main issue with the Ferrari strategy is they are afraid to even try something, afraid to try something new. And that's what always has been one of Red Bull's strength, for example, with Hannah Schmitz in previous years. They were bold and then got rewarded sometimes, but Ferrari doesn't dare to be, because with all the media attention and the fact that they're under massive scrutiny. And the same happens with management. And of course, things are not going well. To be fair, I never believed the preseason hype. I know people already said like, oh, Lewis Hamilton will be world champion and it's going to be a phenomenal season. I never believed that. So I think part of the issue is that the expectations, as always with Ferrari, were way too high, unrealistic. Again, it's not going well on track, but I don't see how replacing Vasseur will solve anything, especially because you're in such a crucial part of the year now. You're in the transition phase for 25 and 26. So what if you bring in someone new? If you take someone from the Le Mans project, for example, with a lot of talk about that, then he has to get integrated into the Formula One team. He has to get to know people. You will lose weeks, if not months, and those weeks and months are crucial, not only for this year, but even more for 2026. So yes, things are not going as they should go, but I really don't see how replacing Vasseur at this time of the year will solve anything. And also, we have to give him some credits, because if you, of course, race execution is still not perfect, but strategy, I feel, and overall this year is at least a little bit better than it has been in years before. Pit stops have improved massively compared to years before. So the main issue is the car is just not quick enough. It's not good on tires. It doesn't have it's not good on tires everywhere, I have to say, because, in Jeddah and Imola, they were actually very quick in the race. But it's especially not great for one qualifying lap to get the tires into the right window. So those are more the technical issues. And of course, the team principal is responsible at the end of the day. But I think it's way too easy. It's just like football. If you get rid of the manager, it doesn't solve things. And also here, if you get rid of him, I don't see things improving, not short term, but also probably not for 26, because these are crucial months for 26.
Yeah, and to pick up on what Ronald said in terms of the lead times, if you look at what it takes to run a Formula One team and improve a Formula One team, Fred Vasseur is only just getting started. Like a lot of the people that he's trying to recruit, they're only just getting started. Loic Serra has only just started. And you know, those people are going to be finally in charge of their first Formula One car, which is a 26 car, not this year's car. So it would be very premature to change a team around yet again when you haven't even given the current guy a chance. Because everything that he's been building up is towards 26. And that includes, yes, it's strategy and execution, but mainly the car design. That is just a long-term project. You know, poaching people from other teams, having their guarding leave. And it takes so long. It's an oil tank in F1 team. So it would be very, very premature to get rid of Vasseur.
Sarah was on gardening leave for 18 months, wasn't he? So that's the sort of lead time you have when you're poaching lead technical personnel. I'm reminded slightly of the situation Ross Brawn had at Mercedes, where he'd got all his ducks in a line for the 2014 season, knowing that he had the best engine and they had a decent technical package. But sadly, the board were getting a little bit itchy-feety with lack of results on track through 2012 and 2013, and brought Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda in, and it was sort of, well, you know, you can stay, Ross, but these guys are going to be running the team, so you can either be a spare part or depart. So quite a peculiar time that was. Well, thanks, guys. I will let you return to your workstations, and we will reunite for a future Grand Prix. Those of you watching at home, don't forget to stick with Autosport.com for all the future updates. We'll be back this time next week with a preview of the Austrian Grand Prix.